Despite the dozens, if not hundreds of times I've been speaking at public events since April 30th, when I debuted on the Capitol, I actually hate public speaking, so I feel very honored that I was asked to be here this evening and to be able to share my thoughts with you on what's been going on. Like Orman said, because I met him when he too was running for a different House district back then, I am a Christian. I am a proud American, a wife, a mom, a homeschooler. We actually have 4 kids, not one, but the one takes the spotlight because she's the youngest. The other ones are teenagers, so she's our favorite. I am a business owner. I'm a freedom fighter and a constitutional attorney. I have been in the legal field for 19 years, although I know I look like I'm only 21, so that's okay if it surprises you. And just because it has been a point of allegation or contention, I don't normally like to talk about my background, but I am licensed to practice law in 5 different jurisdictions: the state of Michigan, the Eastern District of Michigan Federal District Court, the Western District of Michigan Federal District Court, the Saginaw-Chippewa Tribal Court, and the United States Supreme Court. And I've been working pro bono on religious freedom and other constitutional type cases in the United States Supreme Court for the last few years. Since not winning my state rep bid, kind of wonder why God has you do things like run for state rep and he's not going to have you win. Well, the year 2020 was where I got my answer. So, unfortunately, we are living in times where governors set aside statutes with a stroke of a pen. Constitutionally protected rights are turned into criminal actions. But criminal actions like rioting and terrorizing others are being protected by our governor and our attorney general. Wouldn't have happened if my friend Tom had won. But just a few weeks ago, you could get an abortion, but you could not get cancer treatment. You could get marijuana, but not seeds for your garden. You can get lottery tickets, but you couldn't get home improvement items. You could get alcohol, but you couldn't attend an AA meeting. Movie theaters and bowling alleys are, for the most part, still not open to the general public. And small businesses all across our state are closing by the hundreds, if not thousands. And those businesses that do remain open and that are respecting of our Constitution and of God's law are being punished with thousands of dollars of fines because they're not forcing all of their customers to wear masks or for their employees to do so, or similar situations. So what are our local health department and local law enforcement agencies doing about that in particular? Sadly, and I will proudly wear my thin blue line shirt anywhere, but sadly, many are actually enforcing these unconstitutional executive orders. So what are the Democrats, statewide leaders, doing about all of this? Well, they're forsaking the Constitution, their oath to uphold it, and quite frankly telling us, mask up, it's the law, as though they forgot what it takes to make laws in the United States. The whole legislature, governor veto power thing, you know. Well then what are our Republican leaders doing about all of it? Now, not all of them, but unfortunately most of them have just been relying on suing our governor, arguing that her actions are unconstitutional because it's the legislature who should be telling us what to do and when we get to open our businesses and whether we have to wear masks. like they put in Senate Bill 858 on April 30th, that fortunately the governor vetoed.
There's somebody downstairs.
If you haven't read that bill, I encourage you to do so. But unfortunately, some of them are also telling us that we need to sit tight and follow these illegal and blatantly unconstitutional executive orders while we wait for the courts to sort it out. I don't know about you, but I didn't get my rights from our governor. I didn't get my rights from our attorney general, our legislature, our state Supreme Court, our U.S. Supreme Court, or even our president. I got my rights from God. And it says so in our United States Constitution Preamble, that among other things, we created our entire structure of government, our United States Constitution, to secure those blessings of liberty. It also says so in our Michigan Constitution Preamble, and quite frankly, if you haven't read it in a while, I encourage you to take it out every now and then and read it, because it was mentioned in, I believe, the prayer for our evening and for our meal today, how we have gotten farther and farther away from our godly foundations, and we need to get back to it. Our preamble of our state constitution is only one sentence long, and it is that we, the people of the state of Michigan, grateful to Almighty God for the blessings of freedom and earnestly desiring to secure these blessings undiminished to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. Literally, the entire purpose of our state government is to secure our blessings of freedom given to us by God, period. I didn't write this, but I love it. Something that's also important to recognize is that in our U.S. Constitution, we often hear about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, all kinds of amendments, and I love those too. We even hear about the 10th Amendment, right? So those powers and privileges not reserved to the Congress are reserved to the states and to the people respectively, right? But what about the 9th Amendment? The 9th Amendment specifically says that we have a whole bunch of rights that God gave us. And just because we enumerated some of them in our Constitution does not mean that's all that He gave us and that's all that our Constitution is there to protect. We also did the same thing in our state constitution under Article 1, Section 23. We have a bunch of rights that are specifically laid out in our Constitution that were given to us by God, but that is by no stretch of the imagination the entire list of the rights that He's given to us, nor the rights that our state government is supposed to make sure are protected. No one ever thought we would have had to put a constitutional amendment in there that said we have the right to breathe fresh air without wearing a mask in public. But it is a right that we have. Our founding fathers, they saw what tyranny was. So in order to secure those God-given rights, they put a few very specific provisions. In our U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, we're guaranteed that Republican form of government. That means we, the people, retain the power. And we simply elect representatives to exercise certain powers that they are authorized or given by us, the people. When they step outside of that, they're no longer being our representatives. Article 6 of our U.S. Constitution also has the Supremacy Clause, very clearly laying out that our Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and everyone is bound by it. It doesn't say whether you like it. It just says if you're holding office, you're bound to enforce it. Also, we even saw cases that came so long ago, like Marbury versus Madison, that told us that unconstitutional acts, laws, executive orders, they're void. We don't have to follow them. We certainly don't have to wait for a court to tell us that we don't have to follow them. They told us back in the 1800s. Article 6 also requires every single executive, legislative, judicial officer to take an oath of office to swear to uphold the U.S. Constitution. Same thing is found in Article 11, Section 1 of our state constitution, where every single public officer takes that oath of office to uphold the U.S. and Michigan constitutions. Doesn't say when there's no emergency, when there's no COVID. It doesn't say if you're only a Republican in a Republican-led legislature or whatever. There's no qualifications. If you hold that office, you must uphold the U.S. and Michigan constitutions, period. It doesn't even say you're going to uphold the laws. Why? Well, because sometimes our legislature goes astray, or they are misguided, or whatever. Something gets taken out of context later on, and you can't always uphold the laws because sometimes the laws are unconstitutional. So your duty is to the Constitution, because your ultimate duty is to the people who have that authority. So to make this all abundantly clear, we put things in there like the 14th Amendment of our U.S. Constitution, that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. Now that has been taken out of context by our U.S. Supreme Court in several cases throughout the decades, but the words of it remain. We shall not have our rights abridged, period. And even since 1956, our federal courts have recognized that the claim and exercise of a constitutionally protected right cannot be converted into a crime. So if you want to go to church and your congregation has 200 people, you can't be told that you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor for violating an executive order. Or if you want to peaceably assemble, you can't be told that if you peaceably assemble with 500 or 1,000 people, that somehow you're going to be held guilty of a misdemeanor charge because it violates some executive order. So what have I been doing about all of this? Essentially, why am I here putting you to sleep right now when you're trying to get to dessert? By the way, please help yourself so I don't eat it all before you have a chance. Number one, I've been trying to educate the public. It's not always a popular thing for me to do because, quite frankly, most of the time I'm going against both our Democrat and Republican leaders right now. But our Constitution is there for a reason. And I feel very strongly about my faith, especially parts of our dictates that were given, such as in Romans 13, that tell us that we have to obey the governing authority. The governing authority in our country is based on the system of government we have in place, that we put into place through the Constitution. The governing authority is to obey the constitutional principles that we put down in that contract where we came together as a community, as one country so many years ago. We have a duty to each other and to all of the citizens of the United States to follow that, regardless of whether it's popular or not. Number two, I've been trying to educate our legislators. Again, that's not making me a lot of friends right now. Even our law enforcement officers and our prosecuting attorneys, because I know they're in a hard position. May 4th, our Attorney General Dana Nessel put out a letter to all law enforcement agencies across the state and told them that the then current, I think it was Executive Order 66, 67, and 68 were they're enforceable, and that they had no choice. They had to enforce these. They're totally fine. They're legal. They're constitutional. Do your job. Enforce them. Excuse me? No, they're not. So I did my part to help our law enforcement officers, to help our city attorneys and prosecuting attorneys all across the state to understand exactly what was at stake for them. Because they can't follow I was just following orders. We've heard that in our history before, haven't we? So I wanted to let them know, and I spent weeks, a week, I guess, putting together with some volunteers the list of all the email addresses for all of those agencies all across the state in all 83 counties. And finally on Mother's Day, I was able to send out, I know, kind of a great way to spend Mother's Day, right? Able to send out this email to all these agencies to let them know, to forewarn them. I understand that Dana Nessel, who is our self-proclaimed chief law enforcement officer of our state, is telling you to do this. But these are the constitutional provisions that you would be directly violating. In fact, these are the statutes you would be directly violating. And there's things like malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and a whole bunch of other things that you're going to open yourself up to if you go ahead and go down this road of enforcing these. I thought it was my duty to be fair to them and give them a heads up, since she was trying to purposely mislead them. I've also been trying to write not as many, but I've been trying to write briefs on the issues that I believe I'm being called to write briefs for the Michigan Court of Appeals and the Michigan Supreme Court. And again, I'm often the one that's off in the corner yelling, this is unconstitutional, this is unconstitutional, while everyone else seems to agree, well, for the most part, these are totally fine. I don't think any of these executive orders, well, let me put this way. Any of the executive orders that don't comply with Article 5, Section 2 of our state constitution, which simply allow our governor to reorganize state government, and then she has to present those executive orders to the legislature, and they have 60 days to decide whether they're going to disapprove of those. If they're not those, which by the way, at my last count, she had 11 of those this year. The other 94% of her executive orders are total garbage, and they're totally unconstitutional. So those are the ones I'm going to fight, and I think 94% is kind of a bad average for unconstitutionality, but you know, that's just my opinion. Luckily enough, and through the grace of God alone, quite frankly, because I'm sure I was not really impressing Bridget McCormick, I was awarded oral argument time on September 9th when the Supreme Court of Michigan finally was going to hear the issue, a very tiny slice of the issue of whether these executive orders are illegal under the EPGA and the EMA, the 1945 and 1976 statutes, and whether those statutes themselves violate our state constitution. And I was only an amicus attorney. I didn't represent any official parties, so the amicus attorneys that were allowed to participate, I was the only private entity, if you will. I actually filed on behalf of Restore Freedom and in defense of the Michigan and U.S. constitutions. And we were all given 5 minutes. So anyone who knows me, Orman, don't laugh too loudly, please. But 5 minutes for me was very challenging. So I made sure to try to come up with some really good facts and figures right then and there. By September 9th, just to share a couple with you, we had 181 executive orders. Like I said, 170 of them were the unconstitutional kind. She had already extended, by then we had 183 days of this draconian rule. 183 days of her declared state of emergency by September 9th. And so 6 months of this goes well beyond what some of the people originally were arguing as those of us who didn't agree with it were selfish. It's not impacting your rights. This is just temporary. Temporary? Maybe some of the country has moved on, but she's not letting Michigan do that. But regardless, whether it's 183 days or whether it's for 5 minutes, our Constitution, our state or federal Constitution, never allow, even for a minute, any of the constitutional restraints upon our government or the constitutional protections for our God-given liberties to be set aside, ever. And that's why we have courageous men and women that go across to fight for those all across our world, all across the United States for us. Because if they were just able to be turned on and off with a light switch because, oh, this is a scary time, well, what would be the point, right? There's always something scary and bad going on in the world. So the most unpopular thing that I shared with the court that day, though, is something that I didn't even realize, it didn't even click for me, was being argued by the legislature, and who was not the plaintiff in that case. They came on as an amicus. But the plaintiff, they were 3 doctors' offices and 1 patient who was denied care during this because of the executive orders. They were all arguing that the executive orders were totally legal, totally constitutional for the first 51 days. It wasn't until after April 30th that there were any problems. So I made sure in the first 30 seconds I had to let the court know, let all of them know, because they're all officers of the court, they all took an oath, that yes, I agree that they were totally legal for the first 51 days, but they were never, from day one, constitutional in any stretch of the imagination. And they need to be stopped right then and there, because it doesn't matter if they follow the law, if the Constitution is being broken in the process. So the last thing that I've been doing is I've been working on the Restore Freedom Initiative, which is a constitutional amendment petition, because I don't want to see this happen ever again. I don't care if it's a Republican in office, a Democrat in office, I don't care what's happening in the legislature. I never want to see our constitutionally protected, God-given liberties put in jeopardy like this again. So the Restore Freedom Initiative takes care of the 1945 law, takes care of the 1976 law, which, by the way, has some pretty nasty stuff in there that she hasn't even touched on yet. The public health code provisions, some of which are really terrible. Many provisions in there are actually very terrible. It preserves the whole concept of governmental accountability and accessibility, the best parts of the Open Meetings Act, the best parts of the Freedom of Information Act. The fact that if a government official is found guilty of intentionally violating our Constitution, they would be held responsible for a criminal misdemeanor. And if it happens a second time where they're found by a court of law to intentionally violate our Constitution, that's a felony. And they're immediately removed from office. No need to get 1.2 million signatures from those all across Michigan to have a recall election. They're immediately removed from office, and they're prohibited from ever holding public office as a state or local official in Michigan ever again. Also, it gets rid of the unelected boards. Unfortunately, we've seen over time that we're getting used to so many different bureaucratic type of offices and boards and commissions where people just make the regulations and we have to follow them, but we go and meet with them or we hear about them or read about them, and how did you get there? Oh, so-and-so appointed you. Then why are you making the decisions for me? That should not be the case. We shouldn't have a civil rights commission that is totally unelected and they exercise legislative, judicial, and executive powers when we have an attorney general for the state who's supposed to be enforcing all of the laws, including the civil rights statutes. She at least is someone that we've elected, although I didn't vote for her. I voted for that other guy. Lastly, well, not lastly, but one of the main things it does is it clarifies that executive orders are not for regulating the people ever. Now, these are just clarifications. So much of this constitutional amendment is just spelling it out so that when we have governors or attorney general or legislators or whomever, judges on the Court of Claims or Court of Appeals that forget how to read the Constitution, we can boil it down to make it so easy and simple for them that they can't screw it up anymore. And so that everyday average Americans and Michigan residents can have the confidence to read it and hold those exact same government officials accountable for this language. So we are clarifying, not changing, that executive orders are not for regulating the people, that unconstitutional laws are not enforceable from day one, that you can't pick and choose which laws you want to follow. I don't care if you're the governor. And the government gets no additional powers over us in time of emergency, ever, not even for 5 minutes. So what can you do? Some of you might be asking me. That's a question I often get, but I've already put you to sleep. So while you're thinking of the cheesecake and chocolate that you're about to go get, number one, I want to let you know that all of the work that I've been doing nonstop without taking one single day off of work since April has been by donation. So if you feel so inclined to help me continue this work, I would greatly appreciate it. And my husband, the very handsome guy over there, second to only Tom Leonard because he's a friend of mine. No, I'm just kidding. He can help direct the funds, whether it's to the petition itself, the legal work like the filing fees, or just helping us make sure that since I'm not taking any paid cases right now, that we're able to pay our own bills. So he can help with that. Number two, we're about 2,000 volunteers strong, but we need to get 425,059 signatures for this constitutional amendment to make it to the ballot. That's a lot. And I'm not having the funding like some of the other bigger, more named groups are, so I can't pay circulators. And I don't have all the big money ads either. So I need your help. Even if you go and get 5 signatures of the people that you know that love the Constitution, although given the area that I just drove through to get here, I think you'd know a few more than that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Number 3, like I said, I haven't taken a single day off since the first week of April. I've been fighting this fight every single day. Some days I don't even sleep at all. Don't try to have a coherent conversation with me too late in the second day when that happens. So I'm personally asking for prayer for my kids to know that I still love them and want to spend time with them. For my marriage, because, did I mention we have 4 kids? And for my personal strength. I have a degenerative disc disease, I have arthritis, I have all kinds of things that honestly prohibit me most of the time from even standing up for 15 minutes at a time, let alone to be able to sit or drive 3 hours to come to a function like this. So I would ask for prayer for strength to be able to continue to do this work. But next, I would ask that you read and know the U.S. and Michigan constitutions. I sell them at cost because I don't have enough money to donate them, but I sell them at my cost. I have only the U.S. constitutions, but I also have the Michigan and U.S. constitutions on my website, restorefreedomkh.com, which I have some stuff here that has that email or that website address if you need it. I want you to know them. And if you're only going to read one little part, read in our Michigan Constitution, Article 1. It's our Declaration of Rights. Know those frontward and backward. There's some really good stuff in there. And Article 8, Section 1 is about education, but read that first section. It's one sentence. You'll love it. I would also ask you to read, of course, not only our Bill of Rights, but read the next 4 amendments as well. Amendment 1 through 14 of our U.S. Constitution. I'm going to ask that you help us get the word out about Restore Freedom in particular, by social media, by some of this swag, if you'll call it, car magnets or window decals, anything that you can do to help us spread the word on our fight for freedom. I'm going to ask you to vote. We have some big votes coming up. A lot of you look like the well-informed kind of people, so this is probably not news to you. But let me just see very quickly, how many of you really liked the Court of Appeals decision that came out on August 21st, where 2 of the 3 judges said that the governor was totally fine in what she was doing? Anybody like that decision? Okay, if you did not, since that's everybody else in the room, please remember that one of those judges, at least one, is up for election this year. So do whatever you can to support another candidate in that race, which the last I checked, there wasn't one. So we might have to go for a write-in candidate. You know how hard that's going to be? But we can get it done. Grassroots efforts can get things done. And with God, all things are possible. So let's do this. I also ask you to pay attention to the Michigan Supreme Court, because although Bridget McCormick was gracious enough to allow me to have that 5 minutes of oral argument time and has accepted every single brief that I've been filing on these issues from day one, she's up for election, and she so far has not really proven herself a big fan of the Constitution. I'm just going to put it that way. So let's make sure that we get someone in the Michigan Supreme Court who's going to do us right. And also we're losing Justice Markman to retirement. That's not good for us, so we need to be cognizant of who we're going to vote in his place as well. So I'm going to ask you to attend your local city council meetings, your township board meetings, your school board meetings, any kind of hearings that are happening at the legislature, anything. Send emails and text messages to all of your representatives and, like I said, school board members and anybody that's in government. Call them. Follow up on their Facebook posts with comments and questions. Don't let any of them get away with just getting by anymore and not following our Constitution. In fact, I'm going to ask you, run for the next vacancy that you see on your local school board or your local city council, state rep, anything. Even though you might have the odds stacked against you. Look at me, I'm a nobody from nowhere that is fighting the fight, and somehow, through the grace of God alone, I'm able to get the support of at least 2,000 people in the state to get this initiative and this work going to fight for our freedom. If I can do that as a nobody from nowhere, you guys can certainly do a lot too. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of last thoughts from a book that I love just a little bit more than our United States and Michigan constitutions. In all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. That's in Romans 8:37. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart, all ye that hope in the Lord. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And this has become my new favorite, I think. In 2 Timothy 1:7, for God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. Don't let your fear of what's happening with COVID-19 or how our government is responding to it run how you think or how you act or what you do. Make sure that you are using that sound mind and the power and the spirit of love that he gave you to do something different for not only yourself, but your children and all the other Michigan residents that are depending on you to uphold that Michigan and U.S. Constitution as they try to as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really great. So now